but especially on the most marginalized and vulnerable among us. I'm someone who spent a lot of time in libraries. I got my first card when I was 6. Growing up in Des Plaines, I would ride my bike and to the library and fill up my wicker basket totally full. I would ride home with my hand on top, like bouncing. I would devour all of them and go back the next week and fill up my basket again. The library seemed like a bottomless treasure chest. And then in high school, when I was curious and wondering and really, really needing to find answers to questions I couldn't ask at home or school, I wouldn't take the books home. I would sit in the stacks and read them because my interests then were paganism, witchcraft, and sex. Later, when I became a mother, I took my children to the library to check out books, puzzles, movies, music, and we participated as a family in many fun events such as magic shows, summer reading programs, and craft classes. Then professionally, when I worked for the Great Books Foundation, I used our library to find good children's literature worthy of discussion. I could borrow 40 books at a time through the SWAN system, and that was 100 libraries were available to me. SWAN, or the system-wide automated network, gives people in the South suburbs access to books, media, downloads, and research databases. All of this time, I thought of libraries as wonderful community assets, places of learning and entertainment. It wasn't until I met my friend Jessie Ray Cunningham that I began to truly see libraries and the access to their assets as a key to equity and empowerment. Jessie, who is African American, grew up in the 1950s in Sheffield, Alabama. Life was segregated there. So Jessie went to a Black school, which had a library with just a few hundred books. Jessie loved to read, and when she finished every single book in that school library, she headed over to the public library to get a card. But she was not allowed to do that unless she had a white person sign for her. Now, Jessie's mother's employer helped out and signed, but even so, Jessie was only able to borrow one book at a time. And when she brought it back, she was required to stand in front of the librarian and turn every single page one by one to make sure that she hadn't marked, stained, or bent any of those pages. Now, when I was talking to Jessie, I was like, that's so great, because she would have lost her privilege if she did any of those things. And she said, why would I do that? I love to read. Jessie would read a book a day, so she was always back the next day to get her next one. And after a while, the librarians grew annoyed. Jessie's family began to get concerned that she was pushing back against the way she was expected to behave. They began hearing things from family and friends. So for her safety, they sent her north to live with an aunt in Hyde Park. In the Chicago area, Jessie was able to use the Blackstone Library, and that was the first branch of the Chicago Public Library. There, she had the freedom to take out as many books as her heart desired, and she flourished. Interesting fun fact, one of Jessie's daughters worked for the American Library Association for 20 years. After hearing Jessie's story, I began to see public libraries of today, now unsegregated, in a different light. I started to see them as important vehicles for promoting justice and equity, as institutions that look out for those whom society may not privilege. I realized that controlling who can and who cannot access libraries, or what material can be on the shelves, is a way of controlling opportunity and power. Denying access to a library or certain books or resources is a way of denying a human being's right to information, opportunity, and self-exploration. So on a recent trip to my library, the Homewood Library, I looked around and I thought, hey, this place aligns in so many ways to our UU principles. As I compared the scene before me, I was standing in the doorway, I hadn't been there for a while, looking at everybody and everything. I compared it to what I see in my own church each Sunday, and I thought, this place is in fact doing an even better job at living the principles than my own church is. It's honoring who people are. It's intergenerational. It's about seeking truth. It's interconnected. This led to conversations with my sister-in-law, who's on the board. She's the president of the board of the Homewood Public Library. And then with Jenny Cottrell, the director of the Midlothian Public Library. Jenny told me that she sees public libraries as secular churches. And the more I thought about that, the more I agree. So let's look at our UU principles and how public libraries support them. I'm going to lump the first three principles together. They are: we affirm and promote the inherent value and worth of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. I would ask you to think, what places in your community are truly public and open to everyone? We may feel that our churches here, Beverly and me in Park Forest, we may feel that they're open and accepting, but just imagine if a total stranger walked in here off the street on a weekday and simply wanted to sit for a while or use the church computer to check personal email. How comfortable would we be? In America today, most of our shared spaces require money or a certain social standing to access or be accepted in. Malls are designed to sell you things. Museums discourage loiterers. Coffee shops expect patrons to buy something to drink or a snack if they want to stay and read. But public libraries have as their mission to accept and welcome people, regardless of their age, their race, their religion, their sexual identity or orientation, their income, or their housing status. In a very basic way, public libraries give people dignity because they have some of the only publicly accessible bathrooms in most cities. They have a place that's usually cooled in the summer and heated in the winter. They have lights. They have a place to sit down. Even though not all patrons are always thrilled about brushing shoulders with folks who are very different from them, the library as an institution does its best to accept and treat everyone equally. One of the most important ways that libraries support equity and enable people to seek meaning is by providing internet access. It is essential these days to have internet access for jobs, as well as access to technology for those living with disabilities. There are so many technological resources for people, for example, with visual impairment. Many libraries have used federal monies to purchase laptops and hotspots to make available to people who don't have internet service at home. To help bridge the technology gap in rural communities, some libraries have extended their Wi-Fi to parking lots or to mobile hotspots in trailers in hotel parking lots for patrons to access. And many have mobile libraries like bookmobiles. So as for spiritual growth, that was at the end of Principle 3, would you not agree that many of our deepest insights about why we are here and what our purpose is in life come through reading, both fiction and nonfiction, or sometimes through movies, sometimes through music? All of these are available at the public library. While not a religious institution, I believe that public libraries do provide a means for spiritual growth and exploration. Principle 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Now, that word free to me has a couple of meanings. In the monetary sense, it means having no cost or charge. You don't need money or even a library card to access a multitude of on-site resources at a public library. This includes books, ebooks, magazines, job hunting assistance, computer stations, free Wi-Fi, and much more. And the great thing is, a library will never sell or share your personal data. In the other sense of the word free or unrestricted, a public library allows its patrons to choose what they wish to read and provides access to information that patrons seek. You may not be aware of this, but having a sister-in-law who's the president of the board in Homewood, she told me, she confirmed, because I had heard this, that libraries really want their patrons to suggest materials for their purchase cycle. You can say, I'd really like to read this book, or I'd really like you to get this movie. The thinking is that if one citizen is interested or has a need, there must be others as well. As publicly funded institutions that serve all, libraries are very responsive to their community's needs. As Supreme Court Justice William Bennett Jr. said, most eloquently, if there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea offensive or disagreeable. And the American Library Association upholds that First Amendment. The ALA states that 1, books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people in the community the library serves. Materials should not be excluded because of the origin, background, or views of those contributing to their creation. And number 2, libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be proscribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. We're going to come back to this because it has to do with one of the challenges. The 5th principle is the right of conscience and use of the democratic process. My library is governed by a board that we elect. It's quite a process, I've learned from my sister-in-law, to even get on the ballot. You have to get signatures on a petition from a certain number of people in the community. It's not a small number. Then you have to fill out a daunting amount of paperwork and background check stuff. And this board makes decisions on the budget, how much staff's going to be paid, but they don't select the books themselves. My sister-in-law told me that a lot of people think they want to be on the library board because it's going to be fun. It involves very hard decisions because they affect your community. Principle 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. From 2011 to 2016, the Pew Research Center did a number of deep dive studies of public libraries. The study conducted surveys and found that 94% of the respondents said that a public library improved the quality of life in a community. Many respondents said that libraries are highly valued as safe and peaceful sanctuaries in their communities. Respondents also saw libraries as resources that support children's academic success. That was one of the highest purposes they thought a public library should have. Being able to read well gives kids a leg up in schooling and in life, but many children do not have the resources like books at home, parents with spare time or literacy skills, or just the patience to help them master the skill. Public libraries are there to address these needs. They provide story times. They help children and caregivers find books that interest them and are at the right level for them. They create events and programs designed to make reading fun and motivating. And I just think of that Dear Librarian story, how that completely changed the woman's life, the author's life, changed the librarian's life too. To promote a just society, libraries provide access to information and multiple points of view so that people can make knowledgeable decisions on public policy. Librarians are trained to distinguish between real and fake media. They can help people look at the way information is presented, recognize clues on a website, and ask critical questions such as how old is the content and who is providing it. At a time when our democracy is at risk due to disinformation, misinformation disseminated online, the Pew study found that trust in librarians remained high because of their proven ability to curate and share reliable knowledge. So in a community, the public library is one of the most trusted institutions. I like to think that if the media had asked a team of reference librarians to look into George Santos, he probably never would have fooled the New York voters and be sitting in Congress today. Don't you think, Jenny? Yeah. 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, which we are all a part of. I think that libraries are an excellent model of efficiency and sustainability. Their systems of sharing and networking allow for them to serve many people with fewer resources. Take, for example, the SWAN system that I mentioned earlier. By enabling patrons to very easily borrow from any of the 100 libraries in the system, a single library doesn't have to purchase or find space for all of the books their patrons want and need. One library, for example, might specialize in Spanish, literature in Spanish language. Another might specialize in Polish. Jenny told me that there is a man she knows of who's trying to learn to read Braille, and he buys Braille books for practice and then he donates them to the library. So that library has a collection of Braille books that other people can borrow through the system. Public libraries are economical because they often join to create consortia so they can buy hardware, software, and information at lower group rates. Libraries have an exceptional high rate of return on investment. Some have been measured at more than 600% ROI. Recently, I noticed when I put a book on hold online, I got a message back that said that I had saved $20 by using my library system. It's really quite amazing what libraries offer free of charge to anyone who walks in the door. When I went to your library's website and looked at what was going on there and at other Chicago library branches, I just looked at the calendar. I saw a New Year's Eve concert for kids, chess club, an Aegean Greek dance troupe and lessons, dance camp for teens, sit and stitch, baby laps at story time, computer lessons, writing workshops, a Lego competition, puzzle club, gaming club, book discussions, anime and manga club, Spanish conversation circle, Polish conversation circle, chair yoga, open play for toddlers, mahjong, improv club, workshops for job seekers and small businesses, and origami and paper cutting. Wow. And I think I just was looking at January and the beginning of February. Now that I've hopefully impressed you with how beautifully public libraries align with our UU principles, it's time to talk about the pressures and challenges our libraries and librarians face and what we can do to help them. There's three main challenges, in my opinion: funding, the increasing array of patrons' social service needs, and the challenge of responding to groups that wish to censor and remove books from the collections. Let's start with funding. Unfortunately, library funding is not based on use or demand. There are some federal library funds distributed to each state through the Library Services and Technology Act, but most city and municipal libraries are funded through tax dollars, meaning that they run mainly on city or county allocations, property tax allocations. That tax-based income libraries receive funds every aspect of the library's budget, from maintaining their collections to masks and hand sanitizers to maintaining the building. Some libraries are fortunate to have charitable organizations like Friends for the Library, and they also get some income from when you pay for copies, but it's really only a small part of their overall income. Like most social services, libraries are constantly living with a real threat of budget cuts, and their funding is often inadequate. As the economy worsens and more cities and municipalities face drops in property tax revenues, decisions have to be made, like where's the money going to go? Schools, police, fire departments, park districts, and libraries. In the current climate, municipalities don't want to raise taxes, but costs are going up. So one solution that many resort to is cutting their library budgets. Now, why would a community think about cutting their library budget when they offer all the things that I just shared with you? Well, sometimes libraries are seen as a luxury, and there's sort of a myth that everything is online now, so we don't need the place. Libraries do offer downloadable ebooks and audio ebooks, but their purchasing power for these collections is limited by publishers who still want to make a profit after paying their authors, and their authors need to make a living. When budgets are cut, often the first thing to go is hours that the library is open. So you may see, I looked at your Beverly site, most evenings it's only open till 6. And that really hurts people like me who work like till at least 5:30, and students. Sometimes I will have to cut a day that the library is open. So what can we do? All of us are free to speak up for the ideals and institutions that we cherish. Those of us who understand the library as essential to the well-being of our community have an obligation to exercise this freedom. We can make an effort to persuade decision makers that our libraries contribute to and are an indicator of our community health. Another challenge is that librarians and their staff are often expected to manage and treat a wide range of social issues, because those are the issues that walk into their door with their patron population. One researcher conducted a survey of almost 5,000 people at 3 Midwest libraries. Preliminary results show that 10% of those reported needing help finding a job. 6% they said they needed mental health assistance, and 4% needed housing assistance. Now, those percentages might seem small, but many patrons have multiple needs, and there could be hundreds of people using a library a day. It's not uncommon for patrons who are unhoused to use library bathrooms to wash up and clean up and take care of personal hygiene because they've been living on the streets. But if mental illness is at work, a library user may need a lot more than a place to take care of personal hygiene. And sometimes this can put librarians and patrons at risk. Some patrons ask for more security at library branches, and they express dismay at disruptions that some people may cause. But libraries are committed to protecting the rights of all people to use the library as long as they adhere to their code of customer expectations. Jenny tells me that as director of her library, she gives patrons with disruptive or problematic behavior many chances, maybe too many chances, she's been told by the police, before she will restrict their access. Because libraries are seen as safe, approachable places for many people who are leery of the government, there's a growing movement of staff libraries to get a social worker to be on site. Several schools of social work around the country are creating internships with public libraries and other sorts of collaborations so that there is someone present from open to close who is skilled and knowledgeable about how to interact with patrons in crisis, how to de-escalate tense situations, and someone who is aware of cultural differences and trauma-informed approaches that can help patrons in need. These programs are still in their early stages, but we, as UUs, can advocate for them and support opportunities for librarians and social workers to collaborate. Now, the last challenge is perhaps the most serious, and the ones that I think we as UUs are ethically called to address. In a time of very intense political polarization, library staff in every state are facing an unprecedented number of attempts to ban books. The ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked 729 challenges to library, school, or university materials and services in 2021. I think it's a doubling from the year before. That resulted in more than 1,597 individual book challenges or removals. So a challenge is like a formal process where people go to the board and discuss their opposition. Most targeted books in this process have been by or about Black or LGBTQ plus persons. Some of these books are classics that you have probably read and maybe loved, such as I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, Of Mice and Men, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Bluest Eye, and more recently, published books like the Harry Potter series, books about anti-racism by Ibrahim X. Kendi, The Hate You Give by Angela Thomas, and Gender Queer by Maya Kobabe. Even the picture book, And Tango Makes Three, about two male penguins who raise a baby penguin at a zoo, has been challenged. Now, books usually are challenged with the best of intentions to protect others, frequently children, from difficult ideas and information. The top three reasons cited for challenging materials are that the materials are considered to be sexually explicit, have offensive language, or unsuited to any age group. According to the ALA, its librarians continue to maintain that parents, and only parents, have the right and responsibility to restrict the access of their children, and only their own children, to library resources. So it's not the right of other people to restrict other people's children. Censorship by librarians of constitutionally protected speech, whether for protection or for any other reason, violates the First Amendment. Due to the commitment of librarians, teachers, parents, students, and other concerned citizens, most challenges are unsuccessful, and most materials that have been challenged are retained in the school curriculum or library collection. And 2 of these happened last year, one in Downers Grove and one in Barrington. Deborah Caldwell Stone, director of the ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom, says, "This is a dangerous time for readers and the public servants who provide access to reading materials. Readers, particularly students, are losing access to critical information, and librarians and teachers are under attack for doing their jobs." Now, I'm going to tell you there have been challenges on both sides of the political divide, but there is an alarming trend of conservative community members and officials calling for the dismissal of librarians over books they have purchased for their patrons, usually titles focusing on race, gender, and sexuality. So here's just one little example. After a school librarian in Louisiana spoke up about censorship and book bans, specifically books about LGBTQ people and people of color, she endured dozens of Facebook posts and comments suggesting that she was a pedophile, a groomer, and accusing her of pushing pornography to children. She feared for her life. Groups like Moms for Liberty are training their members on how to target librarians on their personal social media pages. So not only are librarians and members of the public who speak out about the need to have a collection that meets the needs of all their patrons suffering, but so are potentially the people who would benefit most from having the challenged books available to them. Last year, there were many, many challenges around the country to a book called Genderqueer. Its author, Maya Kobeb, said, "Having this book, or certainly any book that specifically explored non-binary identity, would have taken 10 years of confusion and uncertainty out of my life." So there are books that many people are looking for and needing that may be removed by these challenges. There has been some success at pushing back at the community level. Librarians in Texas formed a group called Freedom Fighters, and they spell freedom F-R-E-A-D-O-M. It offers guidance to libraries on how to handle book challenges. In Florida, parents who oppose book banning formed the Freedom to Read Project. The Brooklyn Public Library offers free membership to anyone in the US ages 13 to 21 who wants to check out and read books digitally in response to the wave of book bans. And Chicago Public Library has declared itself a sanctuary for endangered stories, establishing book sanctuaries across 77 distinct neighborhoods and 81 library branches. The idea is that each book sanctuary will provide opportunities to expand local access to banned or challenged books. To me, a librarian's ability to provide the books and other materials they know their patrons need and want. If a librarian is not able to provide that, that goes against many of our UU principles. We as concerned citizens and UUs who strive to promote justice and equity need to be watchful and keep ourselves informed. We may think that these threats are only in very red places like Kentucky and Tennessee and Utah, but like I said, they are happening in places in Illinois. I've created a little handout for you that I'll put where the coffee is of some steps that you can take. One is get a library card and check out some of these books to show that they're desired. If there's a referendum to support your library, speak out and explain things to your neighbor. When they ask about the yard sign that you're going to put in your yard. There's some other websites that you can go to that are on this, and I fervently believe that with our understanding of how crucial libraries are in our communities and how crucial they are for helping people pursue truth and a search for meaning, we can commit ourselves to supporting the librarians who open their doors each day to educate, inform, entertain, support, equalize, mobilize, and hold communities together. Blessed be. Please stand as you are able for, oh, okay.